30% unilateral tariffs on foreign imports apply to various U.S. trading partners, which will be implemented from 1 minute past 12 a.m. on the 8th of August 2025. The executive order published by the United States clarifies that goods loaded onto a vessel at the port of loading and in transit on the final mode of transit before 1 minute past 12 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on the 8th of August 2025 and entered for consumption or withdrawn from warehouse for consumption before 1 minute past 12 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on October the 5th, 2025 shall not be subject to such additional duty and shall instead remain subject to the 10% tariffs. The U.S. is South Africa's third biggest trading partner, with the European Union and China being the first and second largest trading partners. The U.S. accounts for 7.5% of our global exports. Thus, we will continue to engage the U.S. with a view to conclude a deal that advances the interests of both countries. South Africa seeks to conclude deals that promote value addition and industrialization, rather than extractive relations that deprive the country of the ability to beneficiate our mineral wealth by mimicking extractive colonial-era trade relations. South Africa's minimal 0.25% share of total U.S. imports makes the 30% tariffs on our country are inscrutable, especially when these same tariffs have been applied indiscriminately to all U.S. trading partners globally. Moreover, South Africa poses no trade threat to the U.S. economy nor its national security. The calculation of U.S.-South Africa trade deficit ignores the substantial U.S. trade surplus in services, as well as the complementary nature of the bilateral trade and investment relations between the two countries. South African exports do not compete with U.S. producers and do not pose a threat to U.S. industry. On the contrary, our exports are crucial inputs that support America's own industrial base. Our agricultural exports are even counter-seasonal, meaning they fill gaps in the U.S. markets, not replace domestic products.
Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Parks Tau, says the Chinese trade relations proposal to South Africa will come with geopolitical implications. The Chinese government's proposal focuses on industrialization and green industrialization in particular. Meanwhile, bilateral talks with the United States in an effort to secure trade relations are ongoing. The commencement of the US's 30% reciprocal tariff on South Africa goods is set to start on the 7th of August.
The Chinese have also said that we would want to enter into an MOU with yourselves, which MOU would look at industrialization and green industrialization in particular. And they've given us the proposal. We're currently discussing it and should finalize it. I'm not going to ignore that that does not come with geopolitical implications, because in the discussions and negotiations that you have, you're likely to, we can't anticipate, but it might be that the discussion about who you are working with becomes an issue. And we've always taken a view that as a country that is non-partisan, as a country that has taken a view that in fact we will trade with all parties on the basis of what's in our interest, but also on the basis of global trade governing rules. We should be able to do that. But I'm not suggesting that there are unlikely to be complications in that discussion. It does take long to secure markets, but these are markets we've been working on. And I elaborated on China as but just one example, as indicated by Minister Lamola. We're in South Africa EU summit in March this year. We agreed to finalize the Clean Trade and Investment Partnership with them. They made an initial commitment of 90 billion rand to be able to invest as an initial commitment. We've agreed that working towards the G20 Heads of State Summit between then and between now and then, or between the point at which we started the discussions, would finalize the details of what constitutes the Clean Trade and Investment Partnership.
SABC News economic reporter Liabo Setho attended the briefing and she joins us in studio now. Good afternoon and thanks for coming in.
Yes, Juliet.
Quite a busy day for you.
Very busy morning, I must say. So we did attend that briefing that the two clips that you've just played there. It was jointly held by the Minister of International Relations, Ronald Lamola, and Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition. Of course, following Friday, the 1st of August, we had a very busy time in the newsroom talking about the tariffs, the impact of these US tariffs on the South African economy, and everything else that's related to it. Well, today they held a briefing just to give us an update on what government is doing. But perhaps before we go into the interventions, Juliet, we'll talk about what they have confirmed, that what they see is that 0.2% of economic growth is likely to be lost as a result of these US tariffs imposed on certain industries.
Of their projections.
Of their projections,
yes, sure.
Right now. Obviously, a lot of economists had been talking about that it will have an impact on the economy, but we just didn't know how much, and the 0.2 is the number that's coming in officially. And there was also an issue about jobs, Juliet. There was also a lot of unofficial numbers going around, but they've confirmed that they see that about 30,000 jobs will be lost. And they did announce some mitigation measures, which include an export support desk, which they say that it's going to be able to help those companies that are impacted to be able to, get through finding alternative markets and navigating the impact, as it were. We know that the agriculture sector is one of those that are very hard hit, especially those nut producers and also winemakers as well that do sell their produce to the US. So those two numbers, I thought they stood out quite a lot for me, because when you look at the economic growth that is already quite low and you have another 0.2% shaven off, it's very significant. The 30,000 jobs, when you consider the amount of unemployment, the unemployment rate that we're already seeing, you already know that will put a lot more pressure. So some of the things that they have announced, Juliet, was the establishment of that export support group that I referred to earlier on. But they also mentioned about the localization fund. This is with regards to those jobs that were going to be lost, saying that they are looking at using that localization fund. I did ask Minister Tau about how much is in that fund and how exactly they're going to administer it. He did mention to me that he did not want to say anything at the moment, because they're looking at modeling to look at which companies are actually affected, how many jobs, which jobs, etc. They're not done yet with the modeling of the impact, so he did not want to mention that. But he also mentioned that they are also speaking with the Department of Labour, and I think he said the IDC as well. So this is mostly to cushion, especially those that would be lost, that have jobs lost. And of course, they're also still engaging with the US. They did mention that they're still negotiating with the US, but that is not an easy task, and that they have to follow what a framework there is that is followed by every other country that is already impacted by these US tariffs. Of course, they're only kicking in a little next week, I suppose, or later this week. They have not kicked in yet as of the 1st of, but on the 6th or the 7th of August.
It's interesting what you say there about Minister Lamola not being able to give an exact figure for that. Would you say it's a relief fund? Would you say it's a kind of relief fund?
It looks like it's sort of a relief fund.
Yes.
It's a fund that's there. You remember that during COVID, we also had most of these relief funds. But he did explain it in a way that I think I understood, that, we want first to look at the modeling. We don't want to give you numbers yet of how much is that, how much we're going to disperse, etc. But I'm quite interested in that fund. One of the officials, Juliet, also spoke to the media, explaining that they also will be putting particular focus on small and medium enterprises as well as township-based businesses to give them the support. But here's an interesting thing. All may not be quite lost when you look at the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which encourages intra-trading within Africa. And they've spoken at length about that this is now the time to be able to use this, to be able to get the companies to have new exports within the continent, which they confirmed that there has been one item that had been ratified by South Africa, which makes the process a little bit easier.
Oh, right.
So it looks like when it comes to Africa, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area may perhaps be the saving grace going forward. But of course, it does not mean that the impact will not be dire with those 30,000 jobs lost, as well as the impact on the economy.
Did they touch on the AGOA agreement?
Not this time around, but it's almost a fait accompli that we've lost the AGOA agreement, and that how much that is going to impact, especially look at the poultry producers. Right?
I wonder if they factored that into those numbers you were talking about.
Most likely, we did not ask that question specifically, but I would imagine that they have factored that in, because when you look of the impact of losing that AGOA deal, it's also going to be quite bad on local producers, especially those poultry producers.
Absolutely. Liabo, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm sure we'll take this conversation further in the coming days and weeks. Thanks. Well, that was our senior SABC economics reporter, Setho, chatting to us today about those American tariffs. Back home, President Cyril Ramaphosa has emphasized the need to build South Africa's resilience within the international trading system. In his letter from the desk of the President this morning, Ramaphosa focused on interventions that government's putting in place to mitigate the impact of the decision by the United States to impose a 30% tariff on South African imports. He says the country cannot afford to be complacent in the face of increasingly turbulent headwinds and must adapt to these.